The spiritual impulse of His Holiness FANPAGE, Superior of Caodaism, is considerable, and his radiance oversteps the already broad frontiers of the Far East, to show itself real and growing, even in Europe and the two Americas. Popes of Caodaism. Le Populaire, Saigon, November 18, 1935, published this news. At TIionN, Mr. FANPAGE succeeds Mr. LİCH as Caodaist Pope. On the occasion of the anniversary of the death of Mr. LİCH, Caodaist Pope, grandiose ceremonies took place at the TIionN Temple on the 8th, 9th, and 10th of last November, which is more than 5,000 faithful participated. A great council composed of Hua Nong San, Popular Council, and Hoi Tan, Sacerdotal Council, was held on the 11th and 12th of November at the end of the festivals to resolve the thorny question of the succession of Mr. LİCH. Unanimously, the Hoi Non San and the Hoi Tan entrusted this difficult task to the Ho Fap, Fan Kung Tak. All motions of confidence also obtained a unanimous vote of the Great Council. So was settled a question that has so many times attracted the attention of public opinion. Let us hope that under the protection of the new chief, Caodaism may quietly go its way. The newspaper noted the ceremonies. On the occasion of the anniversary of the death of Mr. LİCH, Caodaist Pope, important ceremonies will take place on the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th of November at the Caodaist Temple at TIionN. Here is the program of the ceremonies. November 8th, 2 p.m., great ceremonies marking the end of mourning at the Gao Tong Dun. November 9th, 7 p.m., transfer of the Li Vi to the temple. 8 p.m., ceremonies at the temple. November 10th, 7 p.m., transfer of the Lin Vi to the place of universal brotherhood. November 6 a.m., ceremonies before the TRIionT, funeral orations pronounced by high dignitaries. On the occasion of the 10th anniversary, La Presse Indo-Chinoise, September 3, 1936, reminded the Indo-Chinese public of what Caodaism, or Reformed Buddhism, is. The Caodaism, new religion born in Indochina in 1926, lavished upon the first initiates, by the voice of the Supreme Master, Cao Đài, its teachings under the form of occult messages that mediums have scrupulously selected to transmit to them for posterity. The interpreter of Spiritism enables numerous messages emanating from great sages of antiquity to come regularly from the beyond to the holy see of TIionN, Cochin, China. The adherents of Caodaism, ever more and more numerous, learn that the basis of dogmas is the law of the three saints, Buddha, Lao-Tzu, Confucius. The genial precepts of Buddhism are not to kill, not to steal, not to desire a neighbor's wife, not to bear false witness, not to be drunken. Buddhism goes far in the search for protection when it teaches love towards one's enemy, a precept that our Occident, which has given the most afflicting spectacle of hatred, cruelty, and revenge that history records, looks upon with derision. Taoism, of which the doctrine entirely derives from the revered book of supreme reason and virtue, develops parallel to its philosophy eminently Christian thoughts, though it be nearly 600 years anterior to Christianity. It prescribes the worship of truth and discipline of character. This shows that we may meet in the nations considered as barbarous by our ancient Europe the practice of maxims of gentleness and altruism, tending to the maintenance of union and benevolence among men. Confucianism, whose precepts are in no way contrary to our modern scientific spirit, shows a constant anxiety to lift humanity above bestiality by developing qualities, creating a moral and intellectual elite to guide toward happiness the incapable and ignorant who lack the primordial elements of intelligence, reason, and knowledge. To the dogmas of the three saints are added the religion of love and kindness of Christ, the respect of the dead, and the worship of the family. In short, Caodaism gives proof of a great tolerance toward all the existing religions, for it includes all, devotes itself to combat heresy, sows among the peoples a love of good and of God's creatures, the practice of virtue, love of justice and resignation, reveals to human beings the posthumous consequence of their acts, at the same time cleansing their souls. Numerous papers announce the manifestations. Great Caodaist Festival to the memory of Pope LệCH. The Caodaist Temple of TIionP is very animated these days. Thousands of faithful feverishly work to finish preparations destined worthily to celebrate the memory of the dead. The ceremonies that begin on Thursday, November 26th at 7 p.m. will last 3 days. It will celebrate on the same occasion the freedom of worship which the liberality of the French government has granted it. All the Caodaist parishes of Indochina are called upon to participate in the grand program, which includes a torchlight parade and fireworks. A great festival in view. We have been assured that this will be the greatest festival since the foundation of Caodaism. La Vérité, November 20, 1936, gave an account of the joyful events in these terms. At the Caodaist Holy See, 20,000 faithful celebrated the 10th anniversary of that religion. Mourning for Pope LệCH is ended. From our special correspondent, November 28th. From all corners of Cochin China, Cambodia, and even certain Moi tribes, thousands of faithful came to the Caodaist Holy See at TIionP these days to celebrate the Dai Tomb, which, after mourning for Pope LệCH, will be ended. Exactly 2 years ago, the Caodaist Pope, to use an expression of honor here, passed away. The Caodaist Schism is going to be definitely consummated on the occasion of the nomination of his successor. When in the Holy Land, the leadership prudently called Monsignor Pham Công Thach to the functions of a temporary chief, without giving him the official title of the religion. At My Tho, Mr. Nguyen Ngoc Tung got himself granted the title Cao Tong, Caodaist Pope, by a few hundred followers. The new Pope, so named, accompanied by a crowd of partisans, presented himself at the Temple of TIionP to take up his duties and also assist at the funeral of the great departed. Entrance to the Holy See of the new religion was forbidden to the chief of the My Tho sect, for it is only on holy land that the true divine speech may come to superiors of the religion by a medium interpreter. Cao Đài hasn't named His Eminence Pham Công Thach to the dignity of Supreme Chief of the religion. It is understandable that the Caodaist leaders are giving to the festival of Dai Tomb an unaccustomed splendor. Flower-decked floats would have paraded in the town of TIionP, except for the refusal of the chief of the province. We feel this refusal to be unjustified since all was carried on calmly enough. Flowery floats, torchlight procession, fireworks during 3 days of festival increased the popular joy. Electric lights in plenty gave to the Holy Land the aspect of an agitated little city. We met the high chieftains, the real chief of the religion, whom we had met elsewhere, before his Caodaist conversion had worked in the customs, while our childhood friend, Lê Thế Vinh, chief of protocol, has been militant in the Young Vietnam movement for the betterment of the lot of the Vietnamese people. This evening, mourning for Pope LệCH will be lifted. Speeches read, which will inform us of the movement, its tendencies, its possibilities, its future. We know that Caodaism was born only in 1926, under the impulse of turning tables imported from France. But what the public doesn't know is that a half-caste Frenchman, faithful reader of Leon Denis and Allan Kardec, has paid with his own money for the propaganda of spiritualistic ideas in the colony, which has contributed much to the extraordinary development of the new religion, which puts on the same rank Confucius, LİCH, Shakyamuni, and Jesus Christ. That strange syncretism furthermore explains the rapid success of the movement among Vietnamese and even Cambodians. The government might fear for a moment this tardy birth of religion in the very middle of the 20th century. But since our leaders have authorized its propaganda in Tonkin, Caodaist missions have spread even to France and China. May not the present manifestation at TIionP be used as a point of departure for the consolidation and extension of the movement, which has slackened in recent years. The Caodaist chiefs are ambitious to become spiritual chiefs of a part of the Far East thanks to Caodaist development. The near future will furnish us with the key of these enigmas. Reup. More and more, Caodaism tends to unity between other religions and itself, internal unity, magnificent harmony around His Holiness Pham Công Thach, which is one of the first followers chosen and named by the Divine Master Cao Đài, and one of the founders of the religion. His Holiness Pham Công Thach is the chief, appointed inspirer of the Dít N.ĐዔO Superior Assembly of Mediums. This is a kind of holy office for the proclamation and conservation of the pure doctrine, and also cares for the legislative organization of the religion. His Holiness Pham Công Thach was proclaimed Superior of Caodaism by the Popular Council and by the Sacerdotal Council to replace the late temporary Pope, Mr. LệCH, disincarnated in 1934. His Holiness Pham Công Thach is an inspired man, highly mystic, and as generally is true of mystics, a great administrator and organizer. He is a remarkable builder, for it is he who drew the plans of the Caodaist temple of the Holy See, of which the present work gives several photographic reproductions. He drew up the plans and personally saw to, point by point, all the details of the building and decoration, which is magnificent. His Holiness Pham Công Thach's right hand is His Excellency Tran Quang Vinh, Secretary of State for National Defense in the Provisional Central Government of Vietnam since the 1st of June 1948. His Eminence Tran Quang Vinh has been a Caodaist dignitary since 1927. He has ascended the hierarchic echelons, Lê San, Giao Hu, Giao Su, then Pho Su. He was chief of the foreign mission of Caodaism. With that title, he resided in Cambodia from 1927 to 1941. From 1942 to 1948, he was representative of the Superior of Caodaism, residing in Saigon. Founder, organizer, and commander-in-chief of the Caodaist troops. In 1931, he was sent to France, and it was at that time that he created a cell of French dignitaries and followers, among which Gabriel Gobron, Brother Gago, and his wife, Mrs. Marguerite G. Gobron, who may be addressed for information regarding the Caodaist religion in France. Inauguration of the Caodaist Temple of Phnom Penh. On Saturday, May 22, 1937, took place that imposing ceremony of which a speech of the Gao Su Kung Vinh Tan, chief assistant of the foreign mission of Caodaism, or Reformed Buddhism, who is believed to be the reincarnation of Francois Hugo, constitutes the masterpiece. Here are some broad extracts. When our hierarchy named me to give a speech today, when we are going to inaugurate our first church built in the capital of the Khmer Kingdom, I long hesitated to accept this mark of honor, fearing not to be equal to the mission which seemed to me too difficult and too delicate. The insistence of all my brethren of the sacerdotal council was required, in particular that of our dean, the Bishop Tung Bai Tan, who is at the same time our venerable and first worker of the foreign mission of Caodaism, or Reformed Buddhism, to make up my mind to appear today before so impressive and select an audience. Speaking a still uncertain French, and especially not being used to the platform, I beg all your indulgence toward me. Please believe, ladies and gentlemen, that you are in a house where peace and concord reign, where the broadest tolerance has the right to be, where the least discordant word must not be uttered, where all they who are here gather to recognize their duty to love one another as brethren and sisters in order to follow the unique law of God the Creator. Father of all, to whatever race we belong, from whatever country we come. We chose for the inauguration of our first temple the date of the anniversary of the disincarnation of the great Frenchman, of great human Victor Hugo, who has been since 1927 our much-loved and venerated spiritual leader. We would then show our gratitude to France, the country where the great poet was born, that we have learned how to love on the benches of French school, this chivalrous, generous, and humanitarian France. It was in 1927 that the superior of the Reformed Buddhism, Mr. Pham Kun Tak, came to Cambodia, and the spirit of Victor Hugo was first manifested by turning tables, then by the planchettes, at last by a billed basket. So was founded the Caodaist Foreign Mission, and the spirit Victor Hugo became our spiritual chief. Under his teachings, we could propagate the new holy doctrine, first of all in the territory of Cambodia, then in France and Laos, afterwards in Annam and Tonkin. Let us pay homage to those who frequently took steps in France or in Indochina to defend the cause of Caodaism. Mr. Roger Lascaux, attorney. Mr. Lorte Jacob, attorney. President Albert Sirot, the resident superior Richon. Sylvestre Thibodeau, the deputies H. Gernot, Marius Moutet, E. Outre, Paul Ramadier, Marc Lucard, Jean Piot, J. M. Renator, M. Warren, A. Philippe, Mademoiselle Marthe Guillaume, Colonel Alexis Metois, Felicien Chelet, M. E. Toza, Gabriel Abadi de Lestrac, Jean Lafray, Director of La Griffe, C. H. Belen, ex-resident of France in Cambodia, etc. We beg your pardon for any unwitting omission that we might make in this hurried account. Now here we are gathered in this solemnity for the inauguration of our House of God, Domus Dei, at Phnom Penh. It is long since at Phu Quoc, an island situated in the Gulf of Siam, the Spirit breathed as he had already breathed on the island of Jersey, facing the infinite mystery of the human conscience and destiny, by these immortal tables of Madame de Dujardin and de Victor Hugo. It is already long when the Spirit breathed in small family groups in Saigon, and quickly brought the adherents of Mr. Le Van Troon, who was to become the venerated superior of Caodaism, or Reformed Buddhism, third amnesty of God in the Orient. Since 1919, but especially since 1925, our movement has not ceased to be confirmed and to win new consciences and souls on every point of the earth. Certainly it has met, like all novelties of this world, skepticism, mockery, suspicion, and its most expressive symbols, the eye of God that is found in a crowd of theologies and philosophies, the swastika that is the origin of all symbolisms and esotericisms of earthly civilizations, the most respectable of our symbols, were held up to ridicule or earned us groundless accusations because of the ignorance and incomprehension of worldlings who looked only on the outside. Now, says an old French proverb, if you would root up the weeds, first go into the garden. But it is especially the psychic basis, and why should we fear to call a cat and relay a thief according to the immortal verse of Boileau? It is especially the spiritualistic basis of our movement that was the object of the easiest and most obstinate jokes. We will not here make an apology for modern spiritualism, in spite of ceaseless attacks of which it is the object, especially since the last 3/4 of the century. The spiritualistic fact did not cease to win scholars, such as Sir Oliver Lodge, a physicist of world renown, rector of the University of Birmingham, member of the Royal Academy of England, to take only one example. It did not cease to win islands such as Puerto Rico and Cuba, the most spiritualistic country proportionately to its population, and where the radio carries regular broadcasts of a spiritualistic character. Whole countries like Brazil, the home of the gospel, where 8 million inhabitants are acknowledged spiritualists, 200,000 in Rio de Janeiro. It did not cease to win even universities, unbelievable fact, for Utrecht, Leeds, Belgrade, Lund, Buenos Aires, London, several American institutions already have their chairs of experimental spiritualism. At last it does not cease to be sympathetic with the original thought of our epoch, for after having incontestably decided the prophetic character of the mission and work of Victor Hugo, it has influenced the researches of the 3 times Dr. Hans Dreich, professor at the University of Leipzig, German theologian of neo-vitalism, and the brilliant essays of Allan Kardec and even Bergson. So many things we might add in defense of the spiritualistic fact, but suffice it to say that it is most often ignorance, when it isn't prejudice, that causes painful human misunderstanding. It is a poor cause, says British wisdom, that cannot keep a smile for the superficial critic. Furthermore, we have veiled the billed basket, recognizing by the example of the Catholic Church and of enlightened spiritualists that spiritualistic practices, if they can be, and effectively in all points of the world, there are spiritualistic groups in the ices of Alaska, in the ranches of the Argentine pampas, in the luxuriant nature of India. Starting point of a new birth of man, its spiritual birth, they can also lead imprudent, naive persons, individuals with moral blemish, to disastrous results. St. Paul had already recommended to his disciples the discerning of spirits, and thus it was that the Anglican Church, deserted by millions of its unfaithful, united by a certain number of its priests, spiritualistic associations, to consolidate the faith by proof, religion by science, to associate itself in the new direction that humanity demands. 1 adult out of 7 still frequents the church in England. But what is the very characteristic of Caodaism or Reformed Buddhism? It's not so much that experimental, psychic basis, that communion of the souls of the living and dead, that glorious and moving fraternity of visible and invisible worlds, as the effort of a powerful doctrinal synthesis we have realized by mixing the gods of Asia with the gods of Europe. No, House of God is in effect comparable to ours, for European or Asiatic, believer or unbeliever, may lift up his soul towards the hope of predilection by worshiping Jesus Christ, by venerating Gautama Buddha, or, after the example of freethinkers of the Occident, by admiring Confucius. That spiritual synthesis tells us where you may find it now, in this world divided by matter, excited by hatred, blood-stained by war. Is there a place where one may, better than in a Caodaist temple, work for that fraternity of men, that friendship of races, that solidarity of continents in a wide human gathering, having inscribed on its leverum these two words, light of all men of goodwill, spirit, peace. For we dare say, facing the Occident, we are for peace. Peace with the temporal authorities and chiefs, who also have their mission, often unpleasant and difficult to fulfill, in the unleashing of contradictory passions of men. Peace with neighboring nations, peace with foreign peoples, because war bears in itself so many harms not to be a barbarous superstition or a satanic crime. And the French motto of collective peace, the invisible peace, the peace by conciliation, remains our formula despite the dark hour. Such is the meaning of our spiritualistic synthesis. It is true that from Europe comes the slight reproach that Caodaism should have excluded from its temples Mahomet and Islam. On our part, there was no ostracism, and it is sufficient to recall here one of the teachings of Mohammedan mysticism to see that no Caodaist should refuse to recognize that in this anecdote of Sufism, the very history of his own birth in the divine manner, his metanoia or upsetting of the values of the religious soul. One discipline presents himself at the door of the master and knocks. Silence. He knocks again. A voice from inside. Who is there? It is I. Silence. The door is not opened. Later, the disciple presents himself again at the door of the master and knocks. A voice from inside. Who is there? It is thou, and the door is opened this time. Truly a religion that knew how to propagate such truths of the universal nature, a religion that has put upon the lips of certain of its disciples those marvelous words, I am neither Mohammedan, nor Christian, nor Jew. I am a wali, God's friend. Indeed, I say that religion could not have been the object on our part of any plot, any conspiracy. Let the Mohammedans of India, the natives of the French Mohammedanism, believe us in this, and recover confidence for our mutual good. And since we have uttered the name of Mohammedan France, which has erected its mosque in Paris, where 5 times a day blares from the top of the minaret the call of the muezzin, now it is sweet to us to thank with all our hearts, sincerely and gratefully, Caodaist France, that France which, with its measured spirit, its harmonious will, its fraternal hand, always stretched towards the little ones who have not yet realized themselves, has enabled us to be what we are, will help us to become what we shall be. To that France which understood that the third amnesty of God in the Orient, with psychic and then scientific basis, might reach the universal by the synthetic character of religions, which it unites and epitomizes in a daily, peaceful, and active fraternity. To that France which encouraged and favored a new hope in the world, which was recently greeted not only by periodicals such as La Nature of Paris, but also Religion of Rome and Reformator of Rio de Janeiro. To that France always ready to exalt and glorify the spiritual and universal, constructive and benevolent values. Caodaism, or Reformed Buddhism, from its superior and its hierarchy to the humblest of its faithful, now sends the heartfelt expression of its infinite gratitude. In working for our spiritual synthesis, working in the sense of the universal, we are conscious of having worked as Frenchmen, to come much nearer to the French soul with which we believe ourselves to have so many secret and mysterious affinities, that the communion of the living and dead can but strengthen and prove itself in the future. It is before that joyful fact that we dare to express our dearest desire in the world, that liberal, generous France helps us to spread the benefit of our endeavor to all its subjects and protégés without distinction. For to the thirst of souls, spiritual possibilities must be equal to all. Therein is equity, therein is justice, that all may be realized to the maximum, and that all may go to everybody working for that edification of the divine. The castle of the soul, according to the beautiful words of St. Teresa, in the local and ephemeral man, that of the wheel of life, temporary ties to the destiny of those earths of heaven, where our globe is but a stone thrown among billions of others in the infinite. Before those infinite perspectives, what are the stingy limitations that sadly delay the growth of souls, whose wakening awaits a ray of light, a flash of fire? So we believe that France shall have perfect confidence in us, and give to us the same facilities as to other spiritual powers, to invite to our rich feast of divine food so many of our brethren who may not yet come to us, for whom we may not yet go. Let France, faithful to its most sublime traditions, be thanked in advance for service of its neighbor, which is the first and greatest duty of any Caodaist. This ceremony found multiple echoes in the Indo-Chinese press. La Presse Indo-Chinoise tells us of a visit to the Caodaist temple at Phnom Penh. The Caodaist temple of Phnom Penh is situated almost at the corner of Pasquier Boulevard and Verdun Street. Formerly, 8 years ago, it was only a simple straw hut where lived the first missionaries. After praiseworthy endeavors of remarkable propaganda, the Caodaists at Phnom Penh have attracted into their ranks more than 20,000 faithful men and women, among which we count several Europeans and 1,000 Chinese. Thanks to the sacrifice and goodwill of all the believers, the temple has at present become a magnificent building. Its inauguration shall take place on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of next May. On the same occasion, the festival of the anniversary of Father Victor Hugo will also be celebrated. The ceremonies of these two united festivals promise to be splendid. The great chiefs of Caodaism obtain in, such as His Holiness Pham Kung Tak, Madame Queen Sai, will be present at the festivals. Mr. Dang Chung Chiu, chief of the Caodaists of Phnom Penh, with whom we had an appointment today at the temple, could not receive us. Urgently called to Cao Đài, he was replaced by Mr. Hung, who served us as a guide during our visit of the newly built temple. A thin man with an oval face, a high forehead, a little black, scanty beard clinging to his chin, Mr. Hung physically represents the Caodaist type. Very enterprising, he guided us through the temple, recently done up like new, and with competence gave us all the desired explanations. At the entrance of the temple, a large photo of Victor Hugo, in his classic position of a thinker, at once strikes the sight. Near him, on the same table, stands Dr. Sun Yat-sen, the father of the Chinese Revolution. One represents the former reformer of Caodaism, the other the propagandist par excellence. At the center, the sanctuary is at the same time austere and soberly arranged. Without superfluous decorations, there is only a paper globe and an eye painted on cloth. Then, by hierarchic order, are settled the statues of Buddha, Christ, and the angels. On our right, Quang Kung Hao, with a bright red face, is reading. On our left, Fat Quang Am is saying prayers. At the bottom, opposite the sanctuary, hanging on the wall, is a big picture in marble on which figure the names of Moutet, Gernot, Albert, Reup, Felicien, Chalet, etc. Beside the usual functions of religion, the Caodaists also take care of the education of their children. We paid a visit to a class led by a young teacher having under his care 20 pupils, who, with an admirable cadence, recited aloud the lessons they had learned by heart. "All are children of Caodaism," said Mr. Hung to us not without satisfaction, on accompanying us toward the exit. On leaving the temple in our guide, we carried with us the impression that the leaders of Caodaism at Phnom Penh have done much for the triumph of their religion. The results already obtained are the best proofs of their tireless work, which will surely be crowned with success at the next inauguration of the temple. L'opinion in these terms relates the inauguration. According to the prepared program, the Caodaism Temple of Phnom Penh was inaugurated on Friday by various ceremonies to which we shall return later. Lacking space today for a detailed account, here is, however, the text of the speech pronounced by His Eminency Tung Chu Tan, Chief of the Foreign Mission of Caodaism, in the course of the first day. I am grateful to you for coming in such numbers to attend the inauguration of the first Caodaist temple in Cambodia, as well as the festival of the anniversary of the spiritual chief of our mission, Victor Hugo. In the name of the Caodaist hierarchy, I give you, ladies and gentlemen, our liveliest gratitude for your kind attention toward us. You may perhaps have learned of the birth of Caodaism or Reformed Buddhism by publicity other than ours. You found that it was born of a marriage between Oriental and Occidental philosophy. It is the synthesis of all the faiths of the world. What do we mean by Oriental philosophy? It is not that which comes from high philosophical thinking of all the Asiatic religions, most of them being found in China, except Buddhism, which is of Indian origin, but which was also 1,000 years ago nationalized Chinese and Vietnamese. The philosophy that forms the ground of Asiatic morals has already given to the Orientals several millenniums of civilization, of which China is considered the guiding spirit. The Vietnamese nation profits greatly thereby. Through the interpreter of spiritualism, we recognize that a reformation of the moral state of all humanity is necessary for the spiritual evolution of the world. The human spirit had already come to a stage where the old dogmas and doctrines could not satisfy its freer and more sublime expansion. A new era must be reserved to it. That new era consists in giving it a broader horizon for its liberty of conscience. A new faith must be granted to it. That faith must comprise all other existing faiths, while conserving them in their philosophical purity. Hence the name of Caodai, High Church or Great Faith of the world, created by the Divine Spirit. Caodaism, or Reformed Buddhism, practices a large tolerance toward all beliefs. It respects all human consciences, as it respects the universal conscience that is the emanation of God. The symbolic eye figuring on our altar is the image of the individual conscience and the universal conscience. Our worship, then, is the worship of God and humanity. The exterior manifestation of our new religion consists in bringing back all thoughts towards the primordial unity, the conscience itself and the conscience in God. An inward voice makes us understand that humanity is one in nation, one in thought, one in religion. The idea of uniting all mankind in a new conception of love and justice might give the world a more lasting peace by the practice of God. Caodaism, or Reformed Buddhism, has a tendency to fraternize with all races and unifies souls by preaching to the world peace and concord. Such are the great lines dictated by our divine constitution, practiced by his ministers. I close, ladies and gentlemen, my dearest brethren and sisters, in the faith, wishing that divine mercy may be spread on you in the whole world. La presse Indo-Chinoise, in a very long report, relates in detail the outstanding events of the ceremony. We extract only some new viewpoints. The dedication of the Caodaist Temple of Phnom Penh, celebrated 3 days ago, obtained a lively success among the population of the Khmer capital, and was marked with a character at the same time splendid and solemn. Thousands of spectators, the faithful coming from Cochin, China, and the remotest quarters of Cambodia, invaded the temple till its compound became too narrow to contain the ceaselessly growing crowd. For want of space, a dense throng stood along the sidewalks and on the curb of DUV Boulevard, which was filled with peddlers who did a thriving business. Yet no unfortunate incident was noticed in the course of 3 days of festival. The police force furnished by the Caodaist members made it easy for the official police force. With a smile and every courtesy, they guided the guests and interested spectators. In the evening, flags of different nations, pennants, banderoles, banners of various colors constituted a magnificent ornament. With the violently lit temple and agreeably decorated platforms, where took place the reception of French and local authorities, representatives of the press, and guests. Inside the temple, the sanctuary, possessing an austere aspect, did not exclude beauty by its simplicity. On the right and left of the sanctuary were installed 2 altars, the one of Quang Tan De Quan, the other of Quan An Bo Tat. Outside, 2 big illuminated swastikas framed the symbolic eye, of which the pupil was lit by a green electric bulb. Opposite the temple, on the Esplanade Bac Ban, was erected a big altar with the photo of Victor Hugo seated, his elbow on a table, which was attended by 2 rows of members of 3 orders, in yellow, red, and blue tunics. In a broad court situated between the Esplanade and the temple, numerous French, Cambodian, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Hindu personalities visited various attractions, especially the fireworks, the dance of the unicorn, and the Long Ma, accompanied by Cambodian, French, and Vietnamese music, which, vying with each other in talent and ardor, produced a deafening uproar. This speech was followed by a doctrinal discourse of great import delivered in Vietnamese by Mr. Phan Công Thach, who honored the ceremony with his presence from the beginning. The end of the lecture was received religiously and with long applause by a fervent audience. Truly, this inauguration of the temple marks a fine achievement for the Caodaists of Phnom Penh, who did their very best to give their temple, formerly a simple straw hut, a worthy and admirable appearance. LİCH also gave a very detailed account, of which we shall cite only a few passages, indicating new aspects of the ceremony. On Pierre Pasquier Boulevard, in the quarter of one of our collaborators not long ago called the Lake Dwellers City of Phnom Penh, in the place of the little straw chapel dedicated to the new cult of Reformed Buddhism, the Caodaists of Cambodia have built a magnificent temple whose style strangely recalls that of St. Maximin's Church at Chinon. After a detailed description of the temple, we read, "The Ho Phap Pham Kun Thach, who the day before had left the Vatican of Tay Ninh, and who stayed on his arrival at Phnom Penh, in the parish house erected within the circumference of the monastery, came at the appointed time to the temple, arrayed in the costume of Great Marshal of the Celestial Empire, sheltered beneath golden parasols, preceded by a band playing a lively march, and escorted by a numerous retinue. At the entrance of the temple, the Ho Phap was welcomed by the chief of the mission, surrounded by the local clergy. He was shown toward a platform of honor, set back from the porch on which he stood during the ceremony, armed with his marshal's baton. the sight of which must have frightened the unhealthy spirits and kept them off the sacred place. The smoke of the sticks of incense stuck into the vases of ash rose like a curtain before the symbolic globe and divinities. The monks, draped in their red, blue, and yellow gowns, the members dressed in their white robes, knelt on the mats in line and occupied the central and lateral naves of the temple. Now and then, heralds announced various phases of the ceremony at the top of their voices. The festival over, the whole fap was accompanied again by the same ceremonial to his rest house. He then had a quick interview with LİCH. The whole fap femme contact is a keen, educated man. He speaks and writes French admirably. He was reading LİCH when we were brought into the sitting room by the chief of the diocese. Immediately he stood up, offered his hand like a gentleman, and with a smile showed us to an armchair. Fearing the torture of a long interview, he began to let us know that he was a faithful reader of our paper and took particular interest in its Cambodian edition, for he had in the Khmer land more than 40,000 co-religionists.